Welcome back to another episode of Decide to Heal. And oh my goodness, we have such an incredible guest today, Karenna. And I just love you, lady. She was someone that I was sharing with starting off this podcast and the idea of doing live coaching sessions with people. And, it's interesting some of the feedback that I've gotten. Some people are like, oh, that'll be interesting. And are people going to be open enough to share? And because that's vulnerable. And Karina was like, oh no, that's awesome. I love that idea and sign me up. So here we are. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I love that you've created this space in this container just because one, I've experienced group coaching sessions, I've done my own, and just like hearing someone else speak about their story is just so powerful and like things that you don't think are going to resonate or click, you're like, that makes so much sense. So I think what you're creating here on the podcast is absolutely beautiful, and I'm so excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And likewise. Okay, so just tell us your background first, and then we'll jump into what it is you want to focus in on for our session here, our episode here.
Of course. So I speak on overcoming and preventing burnout. So I primarily do speaking and workshops, as well as I'm the co-host of the Fully Expressed podcast. I've been in the personal development space for like 10 years, but like I started coaching women about 5 years ago. So I am someone that loves to dig deep, loves to understand, loves to try different healing modalities. I am here for growth and overall just I really consider myself also high achieving, highly ambitious, definitely someone that is doing a lot of things, probably hence why I'm speaking about overcoming and preventing burnout on my day-to-day life, but in managing my energy and energy management. But yeah, I love growth and I love these kinds of conversations, so I'm so
Mhm. Yeah, so true. As you were sharing, I was like, okay, ladies listening and also gentlemen, like this is all about high performing women that yeah, burnout is a part of that because of why we do the high performance and high achieving. And, we're given God-given personality or gifts or traits that allow us to be drivers and high performers, but those gifts can often become curses when they're not used for the right purposes. So I love that you speak on this conversation. And I don't think we're going to be tapping into that too much today. We have another topic that is something that's very present for you right now in your life. So why don't we just jump into that and share with me like what is it that is currently going on? Like what's basically brought you to this conversation that you want to have today?
Mm. Yeah, so I'll tie it to a little bit to the overcoming burnout thing because one of my
Perfect.
primary steps in that is learning how to have hard conversations. And
Mm,
I think what's really alive for me right now is like someone who has been suppressed for most of her life, really leaned into a lot of people-pleasing tendencies. I struggled with having hard conversations. And I've noticed in my personal relationship with like my romantic partner or my friendships, I've really gotten to this place of being vulnerable and honest and being able to trust that we'll get through the hard conversation or that we'll get through the conflict or the tension, whatever that is. But there's one specific person in my life that I still struggle with, and this is with my dad. And so what's interesting is specifically with my dad, we have this relationship that, and I'm so excited for this conversation. But one, whenever I feel a certain way, I feel like I can't communicate it with him because one, he's not listening. And then two, I also think that in a lot of ways, maybe this is my own story, but he's stuck in his own ways. And maybe you relate to just even that part when you're hearing me speak. Like, I struggle with this internal, like, I feel this one thing, and then so much of me wants to lean into the hard conversation. So much of me wants to change the way that we relate to one another because I'm also craving the depth with my dad, with that father. Like I really do want to have that. And we have that in moments. But the biggest thing that we have that in moments are, and the story that I create is that I can only have that if I do the things that he likes or if I relate to him in the ways that he knows how to relate. And this is like an ongoing story in my family in general, where he loves what he loves and he can only talk about what he loves, but anything outside of that, like he doesn't know how to connect. And so it's interesting because as I grow and be my own human, there are things that excite me more. And I want to talk about these things. And I know that the only way that I can have the relationship that I want, quote unquote, is
Yeah.
if I relate to him with what he knows. So I'll stop there and then ask me more. It's like
Okay,
I can keep going.
no, that was perfect actually, because it gives a good
Okay.
picture of what's been and what you're wanting and where you're at, basically. So it's not necessarily like a big conversation, so to speak, that needs to happen with him. Yes, but it's also like it's not the one hard conversation that's like, this is something that has been impacting me. It's like in general, how you're feeling and you really wanting to have a deeper connected relationship with him, right?
100%.
Okay.
And I love that you brought that up because this is something that I struggle with. Is it having the hard conversation or is there something that I can shift or relate? Because I there was something that came up early this week that like just irked me. Like I started to get emotional. I was like, this makes me feel like I was when I was in high school and in college. And I was like, I could observe myself stepping out and being like, wow, I'm having this one reaction.
Yeah,
And I was also like, am I creating the reaction? Like, am I creating a story based off my past, which I could see that that's connected. And so I struggle internally with like, is it even necessary to have the hard conversation, or is there still something within me that I'm bringing to our relationship and how we relate and how we communicate in that?
for sure. Okay, great question. You were specifically
Okay.
talking
Yeah.
about based on your past with
Mhm.
him, creating based on your past. That's the key part there. Or is this something that you need to have with him? So, however you want to recapture that, go ahead and write that down.
Okay.
And for you listeners, as she's writing down, I love for you guys to write things down because there's something very powerful in your own written word. And it's hard when you ask yourself a question, but it's just in your head. Getting it out on paper lets you see it from a whole different perspective and almost gives you that opportunity to actually stop and answer the question. Because so often we're asking questions and then you're on to another question and then another question and don't give yourself the time and space to actually answer the question. So, yeah. Okay. What did you write?
I said, is this something that I'm holding or based off my past, or is this about having a hard conversation?
Great. Okay. So let's come back to answer that. What I first want to look at is how do you see healing? I want to hone in on healing for a moment here because a lot of what you're talking about has to do with healing and specifically a healing within a relationship. So I'm curious how you see healing.
Mm. That's a really great question. I think for me, since I have learned so much about somatics and nervous system work, I think about like healing as a way for me to create capacity for the thing that I want to be with, right? So, and healing is being able to have the capacity to be with that, but also not let it affect me and be able to move forward, if that makes sense. Being able to move through it. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, beautiful. How does that feel when you say that?
I mean, it feels good. It feels really strong. I truly believe like, especially someone, for me, like anything intense for most of my life has always kind of shut me down.
Hmm.
If anyone has ever yelled or anyone's been really intense with me, like I tend to shut down. And so it resonates really well to be able to say, like, creating capacity to be with intensity, to be in that and feel resilient, not even just resilient, but like capable of seeing another picture or rewriting the story and creating that space. So it feels
Yeah.
really.
Beautiful. So, because of the work you've done, like you know a lot around healing, like what do you think, or how do you think healing happens specifically within a relationship?
Mm. Ooh, that's a really good question. So I think early on in my own journey, I thought healing really worked really. I mean, let's say, I thought there was a lot of healing on my own. So there's one, me on my own, and then
Yeah.
there's me in relating to the other person. So it's a relationship that we have together, and then it's them on their own doing their own things. So in my own process, it has been truly like me, one, working, creating the capacity within myself, but also creating the capacity to share in a relationship and then receiving the thing. And there's also an and to this where it's not always something that they do to help me heal, if that makes sense. Like I can't
Mhm.
be attached to like the way that you respond is what's going to heal me. So there's a little bit of that too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because then it's like you're relying on something external to heal you. And that's an expectation that will never be fulfilled. And it's like a chase then, the chasing after, which leads to burnout. It's
Yep.
just going to be repeating the same pattern, maybe a different disguise, like it's dressed up differently, but it's the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's the
yeah.
same thing.
Okay, so really good. Let's focus in on the healing of your own. So you're saying, which is so true, healing happens like on your own and then also with together and then them. But that whole thing of like you don't have control of how the other person responds or what they do or the healing they're having. So let's just focus in on obviously the ones that you do have. And I'm going to use a different word here than control because language is powerful. So I'm going to use the word power versus control. You have the power to create differently. And do you hear a difference between power and control, by the way?
That's a good question. I do. I think power can be empowering, right, in some
Yeah.
way. And I think it also takes it back into your court, if that makes sense. Kind of puts
Yeah.
the ball in my court when I use the
Yeah.
word power versus control.
Absolutely. You know, the thing with control is that if you think about it, there's a lot of like human aspect to it that we're using control for a way to create safety. Then that always will go back to, I don't feel safe. So let me try and create that safety. But then again, even that will lead to burnout because you'll never feel safe enough. But with power, power is something that just comes from such a deeper part of yourself. Think about we're made in God's image. And does God control or does God have power?
Mm. Power is in control.
Exactly.
Control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we're made in his image, it's not about control. Like we're using a different part of ourself than using that part that is made in his image that has way more depth and ability than control does. So that's what we're tapping into here is this power of healing that is from God and is greater than this human part of yourself that can create not only capacity, but so much more that we can't even imagine that there's this neutrality no matter what you are confronted with, so to speak, and can create something different.
I love how you said neutrality. I feel like that very deeply when I've experienced that in moments where there's a sense of neutrality and I get to choose something different.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're going for here. Which for me, like, that's the experience of what healing is like. It's hard to explain, like, the
Mm-hmm.
end result of what internal healing looks like, feels like. If it's a flesh wound or a physical healing, like you can see it. But when it's an internal, emotional, mental, spiritual healing, it's not like you can, see the before and after wound and now it's had healing. So the best way to be able to describe the experience and what it looks like or feels like to me is that neutral.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really what they said. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to this creating healing through yourself. There's two ways that healing can happen through yourself. There's healing in the moment, and then there's healing outside of the moment.
Mm. I'm writing
So,
this down.
yeah, yes, please. Feel free to.
Okay, keep going.
So, healing in the moment, and this is going to start to answer the question I had you write down.
Mhm.
Healing in the moment would actually be having the hard conversation with him. That's
Mm,
something you choose to do or decide to heal in the moment by having a very honest, open conversation with him.
mm,
Healing outside of the moment would be things that perhaps you are already doing or practicing here, Karina, but like things that are healing that little girl or that space within you that is seeking to people please her dad and has only known how to create connection with him through relating to what he loves. And knowing that the only way she's going to receive his love is through relating to him in that way. Maybe it's even healing that, that she feels unlovable or isn't worth his time unless, which might lead back to, well, I'm not lovable or something of that nature. So that work would be an outside of the moment where it's not with him. It's not something you're engaged in active conversation at that moment. It's something that's going back to helping heal that little girl who is still showing up in your present adult life.
yes.
Yeah, so yeah, tell me how that's landing. What's coming up?
I mean, no, it's landing really beautifully. I mean, that's the inner conversations that I have with myself. But the two parts of me that are like torn when these things come up is like, do I say something in the moment? How do I respond now? Versus, I am so clear on when these things come up as like little girl Karenna. Like even when this moment came up, it was around finances, and I have like this running story of whenever he's going through a financial struggle, he puts all the weight on me to carry it on my own. And I was like, I know he's not doing that right now, but that's what it feels like. And I say that with like I can very clearly say to this day, like I have felt that way before, even though he's not doing that right now, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
this, and so that part's like intertwined into my experience.
Absolutely. Exactly. I want to go back and talk about that too, but let's finish up first this piece we're kind of talking about because I want to go to the in the moment healing. And that in the moment healing, using that word in the moment actually can be a little deceptive because we want to create the moment to have the conversation versus in the moment something is coming up. Because what can typically happen, like for example, if you shared with him in the moment how you were feeling about that conversation around finances or whatever, it's almost like oh, hey, by the way, I've been meaning to have this conversation with you because this bothers me and I'm being triggered by it. So let's talk about this right now. And it's like you're already in that hijacked state and or triggered state is another way of saying that. And you're not going to, it's a lot harder to come from that power of God place when you are in that hijacked state and like that whole safety thing is just on like rampant alert at that moment. And he may also be in that state too. So it's more of like create the moment and it's something that you want to like set the stage for, so to speak. And just being like, well, before I share example, what are you hearing?
No, I am definitely hearing. I mean, I have practiced and shared this, and I see that. So like when this was all happening, intuitively, someone like I was with my friend Rochelle, and she was
Yeah.
like, "Why don't you just talk to him about it?" I was like, "Well, one, I'm not in a place to have the conversation, and intuitively, like I know, like the best time to have this conversation is when we're going to the beach or these moments that where I can create the space where both of us feel safe because I know that if I jump when he's activated, it's just going to create fire and neither of us are going to hear each other. So I love that reminder. So thank
Yeah,
you.
very good. Okay, so then let's keep going. What is your intention is important also for these like hard, I call them speaking truth conversations and having an understanding of the intention because intention and expectation can get mixed up and intertwined and convoluted and most of the time we think we have an intention but it ends up being an expectation. So what would your intention be in having this, let's call it like a big healing conversation with him?
I mean, my intention would be to feel closer to him.
Mhm.
really. And in that, like, I think for me personally is my intention is to feel clear, feel closer to him. My intention is also to share with him where I'm at because I know that in past relationships where if I know I've kept so many parts of myself from him. So I want to get him, I want him to get to know me, like there's also a little bit of that. So like, and then hopefully us getting to a place where there's this genuine, loving conversation around what it looks like for us to meet each other
Yeah.
regularly in like our day-to-day lives, not just when we need something of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is where a 180 comes into play. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Totally, totally hear what you're saying. Like, and it makes complete sense of the intention and it comes from a really good place. And if this is the intention, it will fall into an expectation without you even recognizing. And it won't actually be what it is that you're seeking. And here's why. When you're sharing like where you're at or like get to know me, it is almost this like okay, for lack of a better word for the moment, it is an expectation of like, I want you to understand me,
Mhm.
know who I am, like who I am, receive who I am. And that's that underlying message of like what you're saying. So that little girl is kind of sneaking up in there a little bit of like, just love me for who I am and see me for who I am. And so that intention, although good, and yes, really these conversations, because remember, we're talking about healing you. So the intention, blanket intention for these bigger conversations like this, you'll have a much better outcome. And really, it's what it's about fully is healing yourself.
Mhm.
That's it.
Mhm. So,
Everything else from that point, that little sneaky part of us that what I call the ego that edges God out, that wounded child like starts to sneak up in there and you don't recognize it, like blatantly. Yeah.
mhm.
How's this landing?
That's land. So like would my intention shift to I mean it feels like it would if my intention shifted a little bit, it would be purely for it would feel like it would be for like my inner child, the ability to share where she's at. Like I feel like, that's the other part to this whole dynamic is like I don't really express myself with him. And so my intention would be able to give her a voice in
Yeah.
this relationship.
Yeah. And that's the only reason you're having the conversation, you to heal. That's
Mhm.
it. Period. Done.
So good.
There's three things that I like to incorporate in these kinds of conversations. One is that you're sharing in the I form because it is your truth. It's where you're coming from. You're also taking ownership rather than placing blame
Mhm.
and having zero expectations. How he's going to respond, what he's going to say. And again, what I hear so often from clients is more it has to do with like understand where I'm coming from or understand me so that I'm loved or I know I'm validated, something of that nature that will connect back to something in our past. So if there's no expectation and you're just really the only intention you're doing it is for the sake of your healing, that's when, ironically, the 180 starts to happen and there's this opening that the other person does start to. Oh, I've never seen you in that way. And oh, because you start to create differently because of the healing you're having. And there's not that disguised expectation coming through the conversation and beyond.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Okay, so one thing that comes up for me as you're saying that is like my mind immediately went to, well, if I have this conversation, there's a high chance that I won't even have a relationship with my dad. Like there's like this assumption, right? Like my
Yep.
ego immediately goes to SOS. We're
Yep.
just not gonna have a relationship at all with your dad if you just share this part of you. Like you could keep it the way that it is, so you have some kind of relationship with him. That was like the first thing that came to mind. And then the second question, the other thing as you were talking that really came up to mind, and I know that that's like my ego running the show, like I can totally see that that's happening. The other part that comes up to me is especially because I've seen this to use your words, the 180 method happen in like my romantic relationships and my friendships. Like it has
Yeah.
been so beautiful. There's like this little stuck piece with my dad where like I just simply don't feel safe to express it. And I mean, that does come from a past deeper wound that I'm happy to share. But, and so it's interesting to be like, I understand all this, but I just simply don't feel safe with him.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. So this is where, and I don't necessarily think, unless you want to, sharing the piece that it's about is important. It's more so just the result of not feeling safe, and hence that's why you haven't had this conversation. But Karina, because of that, you've been kind of dancing around it.
Mhm.
And it's landed you in this place where like you have this desire and this drawn, this will and this want, not even for the relationship, but for your further healing, because I know you're committed to growth and movement, and everything is connected from our business to our finances to our romance to our health, you know. So this piece connects to all of it. And so it's like what you had been doing isn't really working. Now, that doesn't change the fact that you still don't feel safe, but that's why healing happens in the moment and outside of the moment, and why this conversation would be about healing you, and that's it. Because it will begin to create the safety that isn't his to give you in the first place. It's you creating your own safety because of your relationship with God.
So good.
What'd you hear?
I mean, just like me creating the safety for myself, I feel like once I realized how I left my inner child behind for so many years,
Yeah.
I did so much for her. I'm like, this is for her, at the end of the day, because I know what it feels like to leave her behind. And I really do think that this is like the one area, especially with him, that it is kind of like a big part to the missing piece, if that makes sense. It's the missing piece, this whole thing. And if I can get there with her, if I can do this for her,
Yeah.
it's to unlock, I think, something else so
Oh my
beautifully.
gosh. I can feel that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you're taking ownership, if you're, really, really coming from the intent of this is just for my healing and allowing whatever unfolds from that place. So going back to your question, and I don't know if this was the actual question or not, Karina, but like around you may lose the relationship. Yeah, you have to be willing to do that. But it's not the relationship you want now, anyhow, and it's not really serving either one of you at the moment. So it is something you have to be willing to put on the line, knowing that it could turn into something incredible or it could mean the end of the relationship. But either way, to continue down the same path is a 360. You just doing the same thing on the hamster wheel, which will lead to a burnout point or will lead to a like blow up point, with him. So there's only one way to find out. And that's why having the zero expectation of like, okay, I'm just trusting and complete surrendering of this and I know I need to heal. So here we go.
So good. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's landing. It really is. And it's a really beautiful reminder and reflection back to me, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like there, it's landing for sure.
Good. I think
Mhm.
these conversations are like, I also visualize healing like we all have these walls in front of us that have, the healing, the thing that needs the healing is the wall. Think of it that way, right? And like these hard conversations that you've been having are hard, but it's like taking a hammer to the wall and like chipping away at the wall through these hard conversations you've been having. It sounds like this is the big one. And if you grab the hatchet and you take the full big swing to the wall, it's going to crumble
Totally.
down. versus having a lot of like different, you know, not that you won't have to have hard conversations in the future. They will just feel so different once you've taken the hatchet to the wall and it's down versus, you know, let me knock it down. It'll still come down. It's just going to take a lot longer.
So true. No, yeah, this is the big one. This is like the big daddy to bring it all together, which is so true. So,
It's so
and I
true.
feel that really deeply. So,
Yeah.
mm.
Okay, let's round back to one more thing, which is creating, because all this healing leads to then what gets created in the future. So, how do you see, like, tell me what you know about how circumstances or relationships are created?
Circumstances or relationships are created. That's a good question. I don't know. Literally.
I,
Um,
that's
some,
okay. So, take a guess.
yeah. So something that is created or circumstances created, negative or positive or just as is.
Both,
Okay.
because there's
I
both in life, right?
Yeah, they are both in life. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think the way that things are created are when two people come into a situation in relationship, they have completely different lived experiences
Yeah.
and or perceptions or backgrounds or the way that they view the world. And so something either it's tension or the way that they see something, a circumstance is created because two different elements are coming to meet one, if that makes sense.
Very good. Love that. Yeah. Okay. So totally right in alignment there. Okay. So this is it's an important piece to know because you're talking about also like create like I'm coming back to your question. I think you wrote it down a little differently, but the way you said it the first time is this something that you are creating based upon your past
Mhm.
or you need to have the or to have to hold the conversation, the hard conversation, something like that. And so now you know about the conversation part. Now let's focus on the creating piece, which is why I wanted to ask you this. Oftentimes we think about creating happens through how you respond to a particular situation, which there is truth to that, but it's only part of the truth because the way that you're responding to something is coming from somewhere. Like you could have all the best intentions of like, you know what? I'm not going to react impatiently to anybody who like ticks me off or cuts me off in line or is driving way too fast. Like you could have all the best intention, but then someone cuts you off and you're right there like, "Okay, what are you in such a hurry for, buddy?" And you get kind of like, and I'm not saying you do that at all. I'm using more of my own experience here. So it's like it still comes from somewhere,
Right.
the ways that we react. So there's like how you create and how you impact
Mhm.
circumstances and relationships. And impact is more of the way in which we react to things, the way that you're reacting to things. So, like in that conversation with your dad, for example, whatever he says, however you react is going to impact future circumstances with him and as well as impact the relationship with him.
Mhm.
But again, that reaction is coming from somewhere. So is the creating part.
Mhm.
The creating part comes through how you relate to yourself. And how you relate to yourself is basically the relationship you have with yourself. Like, listen to the word relate, relationship, like they stem from each other. So, the relationship that you have with yourself, every relationship has these four things: views, thoughts, feelings, and then those views, thoughts, and feelings cause you to act the ways that you do. So you view yourself a certain way, you feel about yourself certain ways, you think about yourself certain ways. It causes you to act the ways that you do towards yourself and towards others. Dad, you view him certain ways, you feel about him certain ways, you think about him certain ways, causes you to act the way that you do. Anybody in your life that you're in a relationship with has these four things, but it all stems from the one that you have with you. So that's why the healing outside of the moment is so important because there's ways that you are viewing yourself, Karina, when it comes to your relationship with your dad, that you are creating the circumstance that, he's not listening. He doesn't care. The only way he'll connect with me is if I relate to him and what he loves to do. And you were mentioning it from a story perspective, but the story is more about him versus you turning the mirror around and looking at you. And like, what is it about you and your views, thoughts, and feelings about yourself that then create the circumstances with him and then cause you to impact future circumstances with him? Okay, there was a lot I just said there. So tell me what's coming up.
No, I mean, I love the way that you broke it down. And even when I talk about my relationship with him, I know so much of it is the way that I view myself. So some of the work that I've done has been around my worth and if it's something that I like or don't like. And it's really stems from a lot of the stories and circumstances that I created between me and him when I was younger. So, for example, one of them was I played sports my entire life and I got injured really quickly because I have this. I told you about this. I have EDS, which is like the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which
Yep.
basically I dislocate often, or I can break bones really quickly, but I was a really good athlete. And so I basically did sports. I did every new sport I could based off the injury I had, like what would give me the thing. So he loved soccer. And I played soccer my whole life and I was really good at it. But eventually my ankles and my knees were like, you can't do this anymore. And so when I got into high school, I decided to play water polo. And I vividly remember asking him, like, why are you not coming to my games? And like, I want you to come to my games, and you don't come to my games anymore. And he literally said, he's like, I'm not coming because I don't like water polo.
Yeah.
And so, so much of that, like hearing that back was like, oh, then you don't approve of what I do. Like, this is attached to my self-worth. Or like, I'm not worthy of you to come to my games. You don't love me, all the things. And so, even identifying that to how I attached it to my self-worth in other areas of my life is very interesting. So, that was what came up for me when you were saying that.
Yeah, I mean, just those are a few ways that you relate to yourself. I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, and even though it's attached to him, like there are meanings that we give to the things that happen in our life, right? And then it becomes almost like this identification that is this view. So a lot of people call those limiting beliefs, and they obviously limit, but it's more of a point of view that you take about yourself based upon what's happened. And that's why the healing outside of the moment is going to be so important too. Because healing doesn't necessarily lead to this point of, I am worthy or I am lovable. People think that that's where healing leads, and it makes total sense and it's very logical. So, this in itself is also a 180. We want to get to that neutral state we were talking about. You don't get to the neutral state by having an opposite of the other. It basically what allows the neutrality is the ownership of the thing you're fighting against,
Mm.
which sounds ridiculous if I put it into
Yeah,
context.
say that again. So, what do you mean? Peel it back a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, taking ownership of the thing that you're fighting against. So, for example, when there's healing, you would get to a place, this is the ridiculous sounding part, where you're owning that you're not lovable
Mm.
or you're owning that you're not worthy. And there isn't an effect either way. There's just this very beautiful, neutral, like, okay, well, and, moving on. And it's not from a place of, I don't care. It's literally that neutral state that doesn't mean anything because there's this human part of us and there's this being part of us.
Mm.
That's why we're called both human being. The being part is that made in God's image, direct link connection to Him. From being, of course, you're worthy and loved. Doesn't matter. But the human part is where we're trying to like fight against, no, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. And then there's all this resistance, and what you resist will persist, which only feeds the I'm not worthy more. So through healing, getting to that place of owning it's okay for me to be not worthy because that's all human stuff that is like the wind. It's gonna go anyways. My being is the truth and what is long lasting and sustaining and eternal. So what does it matter if I'm worthy or not worthy or loved or not lovable? Because that's all human and will flee like the wind does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm definitely following. I mean, I love that you broke down human versus being and connecting being to God. And that's what I think about my own relationship with God in a lot of ways is like he loves you as you are. But I love the way that you took off, like whether you're worthy or not worthy, whether you're lovable or not worthy, lovable, like at the end of the day, your being is God. So yeah, it was really beautifully said. That's what
Yeah.
stood out.
So
Mhm.
that's what allows you to get to that place of ownership because it's not going to be this awful, horrible, wrong thing where you're like, that's that fi we're fighting against, you are fighting against trying to be worthy. You're trying to prove to your dad that you're worthy so that he'll not understand, but like know who you are and pay attention and know what you're feeling and want to have connection with you on a deeper level. Whereas if you just own that you're not worthy, ironically, it'll 180 and it'll start creating this like, hey, what is it that you're doing now? And you'll be like, wow, okay. And that was a creation not from what he did in his own healing work and his own stuff, but from what you've done in yours.
I've witnessed that too in other areas of my life where
Sure
I've
you
started
have.
spirituality and things like that. And I'm like, wait, it's almost like a when those moments do happen, I'm like, whoa, did that just happen? Like, what
Hmm.
is going on? My perception of this experience is so different compared to how it used to. So I can totally see that. And breaking it back down to what you were saying. So it's truly owning whether I'm worthy or not worthy. Is that
Yeah.
fair? Like me
Yeah.
believe,
Truly owning that you're not worthy.
yeah, got it.
And notice like if you feel that like I don't like that. Well,
Yeah.
that's where the healing comes into play. And that would be the area to just, travel back into those places where the not worthy took hold in the first place. And keep in mind, it's all human based. That stuff is all human stuff, not being.
Mhm.
And you're trying to get to that place of being. And being does not operate out of opposites. Worthy,
Mm,
unworthy, lovable, unlovable. It does not operate in opposites.
yeah, so good.
How are you
Yeah.
feeling, my friend?
No, I feel so good. I mean, I'm glad I brought up this specific conversation because it's
Me
something,
too.
like I said, it's like a big, big part that I haven't like necessarily focused on, quote unquote, in my healing or in this journey. And I know it's something that I want to unlock for myself. And I can already see myself unlocking it. And I can't wait to re-listen to this
Yeah.
episode on the podcast because I'm like, what else am I going to take from that? But
Yeah.
I'm feeling really good and honestly, just more like I talking about safety. What's funny, I find when I'm able to break it down and understand, which is me just trying to find safety and understanding it, the way that you explained it was so helpful for me to visualize it in my mind.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. All right. So
Mhm.
you have some action items.
I too. Healing on the inside and healing outside of the moment.
Exactly. Very good. All right, my friend, this has been amazing. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you found value in this, or if you have someone, a friend, a sibling, maybe it's yourself that is struggling in a relationship with a parent. Like I hear this a lot too from clients. So, share the episode with them, share that love with them. Please remember to review and download this episode. Thank you so much, Karina. Thank you to everybody listening. Love you and God bless you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Alejandra.
Thank you.